both chose government as your primary major, but you both also dedicated a lot of time to learning Russian. What got you interested in Russian and post-Soviet studies in the first place, and what motivated you to improve and to advance in the language?
Interesting question. Well, I'm actually Serbian, so when I came to William & Mary, I always knew I wanted to study another language. So I was kind of between Arabic and Russian. But since Russian and Serbian are kind of similar, I thought that maybe if I could learn Russian, eventually I could learn Serbian. And I guess the other motivation was once I got in, I kind of just fell in love. I think that happens with a lot of students. The first class is kind of intimidating when you're told to learn the alphabet and have it down pat, but once you get past that and you start learning the language a little bit more, it really almost becomes a little bit of addicting.
I came here thinking that I might actually be a German major because I had spent more years doing German than Russian in high school and middle school. And I got here and I realized I didn't have time for both, so I picked the one that I knew there was a smaller faculty and I would get probably more use out of because there are fewer people who speak it. And like Danny kind of said, is once you start, you're hooked. And because every time you learn something new, you want to learn something else. And then Middlebury kind of pushes that even further because Middlebury just creates this mindset where you want to learn something new every day, and you do because they make you. And so then it just kind of stuck. And then after that, obviously trying to spend time in Russia was the next step. And once I went once, as soon as you leave, you want to go back.
Your experience in the RPSS program was not restricted to the classroom. There was Gazeta, Ruski Dom, Olimpiada по русскому языку. Can you comment on the role collaboration played in these specific experiences outside of the classroom? And what did you learn about collaboration in general during your time here at William & Mary?
I think specifically to things that I've done in the department, Russian Language Olympics, it taught me a lot about collaboration. It also was the fact that I did it both before and after I went to Russia was very interesting for me because it's just having Russian faculty and American students working together introduces you to some of the differences in mindset that then I understood more once I went to Russia. That there are sometimes implicit difference in perspective in whether it's making a schedule or explaining what you're doing, that we sometimes approach things differently just because the way we were taught. And once I went to Russia and came back working on the Olympics again, I felt like I got much more out of it because I knew how to talk to a lot of different people.
Well, I'd say the main role of the collaboration and all of those different extracurricular activities, or if you're taking them for classes, is that you really have to communicate. But most of them require communicating in a different language, right? So for the Russian Language Olympics, those meetings were all in Russian, and it was required of us to provide different materials in Russian. So I thought that was really helpful. But the other thing that I think is really important about collaboration, or maybe what makes the collaboration fun in those outside activities, is that the Russian department's really close-knit. So you really get to meet your classmates, right, and try to understand them further. And that's important in collaboration. How can you collaborate on anything if you don't really have a personal relationship with some of these people? So, making relationships with like Logan and Cole and Taylor and all of these people in our department, I think it played a huge role. And collaboration is kind of a buzzword. And when you have these different experiences and you could talk about them, how you collaborated on different projects, it's really important.
I would like to congratulate you both again on receiving the Fulbright grants to go teach English in Russia. We're very proud of you. Can you tell us about your experiences both in the RPSS program and outside of William & Mary that inspired you and helped you on this path toward the Fulbright?
I'd say kind of just in the experience timeline. The first one is walking into class on the first day of with you, of course, and kind of being a little bit terrified because everything is so new. But once you've finished that first year and you kind of have a basis for the language, that's where you can either go either way. So my sophomore year, I actually went over to England to study abroad at Oxford. And I remember taking a Russian Politics of Russia class. And it really motivated me. And at the same time, I had applied for Middlebury, and then Middlebury worked out, and I went there that summer. And that is when the love for the language really solidified, because like Logan was saying earlier, at Middlebury, you kind of just get drilled with the language stuff, but it all becomes more enjoyable once you start, once you're able to use it, more inherently. But the last part, I think, of the journey was going to Russia itself, because you have somewhat of the skills, but who's going to teach you the first time when you walk up to the border control or the passport, and the woman just looks at you and says, like, just go, American, you don't know what you're saying. So, everything's an experience, and then once you gain on these experiences, like teaching Russian children and, teenagers, and realizing, wow, this is really difficult, and maybe you didn't even know English as much as you knew it before, but you should.
Can you actually explain a little bit about your trip to Russia? Because I think most of our students, their first experience of going to Russia is on the summer study abroad program, but you did something different.
Yeah, so I decided to teach English primarily because I was thinking about doing the Peace Corps. So I was always thinking about working backwards, which is like you need the experience of teaching English to say that, I could do it again in the future, maybe in a different country. And I'd always thought I wanted to connect Russian, maybe in a post-Soviet state with the Peace Corps. So I went to Russia, and then I got there, and I decided to volunteer as an English teaching intern. And you learn that it's a lot more difficult than you think, but anytime you're going to Russia, you're just surrounded by, it's so beneficial because you're surrounded by the language. When you pick up a newspaper, when you pick up anything, it's in Cyrillic and it's in Russian. You just have to learn how to deal with it. And when you're at a cafe or anywhere else, you don't hear English, you hear Russian. So that was the major part of my experience, and that solidified kind of my love for the language, but also just wanting to go back, right? And so now I'm super excited. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I'm going back, and it's going to be a similar experience, but this time it's going to be with college students. So I'm really excited about that.
So I have a fairly similar kind of path as Danny, because we shared a lot of the same, I guess, kind of crucial decision points in deciding that we wanted to go and where we wanted to go. And I think starting in the department as a freshman, it really did start me off, because so early I had people who were willing to work with me and also push me to get more out of the language, not just to come to class and turn in my workbook pages, but when I thought about going into Middlebury, you and Sasha were there to say, yes, absolutely do this, here's what you need to do to go. And then going there, I mean, that was my first real experience immersing myself in Russian, and just being surrounded by it constantly, which I felt, for as many hours as it was terrifying and frustrating, it was also probably one of the best things I've ever done, which made me really decide to stay with the language, and that's what made me decide to come back and use it as a major, as opposed to just take the 2 years I thought I was going to take. And then, as Danny kind of had happened too, I began looking for a way to try to spend time in the country to immerse myself at the other level. And I really, I don't know if it sounds snobbish, but I really wanted a chance where I could be away from just American students and just, surround myself with everyday Russian life, because I felt like that was, what was going to kind of beat me over the head and force me to use it. And so I went through the same program as Danny and found a teaching position and immersed myself first in a school and then in a summer camp. And what I thought was going to be a truly terrifying experience of teaching little kids actually is what made me decide to do the Fulbright, because, conducting English lessons for anybody between the ages of 7 and 19, it's like, wow, this is, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But also, just, having a little kid come back to you and use a phrase that they learned from you the day before, it's like, okay, this, and then you use a phrase that they taught you in Russian. And it's like, well, this is a relationship that I could see trying to build again and again, and worth doing.
We're all very excited for you to spend this year in Russia teaching English. And maybe at this point, it's hard for you to even think beyond this next year. But What do you hope to pursue in the future?
In my immediate future, after I come back, we'll be with the Army in fulfilling my contract and getting that done. But based on my experience at Middlebury and hopefully in Fulbright, I'd probably like to pursue graduate studies in Russian, possibly trying to go back to Middlebury for grad school, and then eventually either live and work there or try to teach here.
Well, I think the great thing about the Fulbright program is that there's this really overarching idea of cultural diplomacy. So I'm really trying to utilize that experience or different experiences in Russia to, when I come back, possibly studying for the Foreign Service exam and talking about those experiences, maybe gaining language proficiency to help on that exam and, possibly helping in the State Department. But I'd also like to pursue graduate studies in Russian studies as well. Probably first just a master's. I don't know where just yet, but possibly I would really like to somehow get back to Oxford, maybe an MSc there, 1-year master's. So I think that's kind of the future, if in a perfect world, if that could happen.